Evet, Sayın Konuk.
Distinguished guests, distinguished audience, we will be having the 12th session, and the 12th session is on financing. Actually, last year, it was mostly about the guarantees that we had a panel, especially what the guarantee situation in the country is for loan issues. But this year, we've just decided to do something totally different, and it is just going to be have to use the financing directly. I mean, why we have decided to be straightforward? Because there are now new utilities, new opportunities, and the main aim is at the same time to somehow improve what we're already doing, because this is what we did in the last year. And especially, very briefly, we would like to listen to the international finance institutions, their approach, and we also have a development bank together with us, especially away from the commercial concerns. It is mostly about direct investment. You know, as the entire Directorate General, a bank, we would like to have a bank that does not have any commercial concerns, but mainly focusing on development. Also, İş Bank, Vakıflar Bank, they actually have quite a wide network of branches, and they also have too many technical staff, and also we wanted to see the differences in their practices. We just decided to do something else, and we also wanted to have an investor in the panel, someone who actually needs financing. Again, a professional colleague of us is with us, and will provide us a different perspective, and the person at the other side of the table, we can say. From IBRD, we have Andy, and I would like to give the floor to him. Andy, what actually ERDB is doing in this respect, and in particular, as an international finance institution, what their approach is, in particular, what their perspective is. And he'll be briefly providing us information. Actually, the credit, the loan side will be discussed, but it is also the equity support and equity capital, and we expect him in particular to focus more on equity capital, because they have ongoing works. And so the floor is Andy. So let's start the panel.
What would you like to, if you want? Yeah. Okay, you can take the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'll do my presentation in English quickly. I will not focus too much on it because we have a big panel, and I would like also to give the opportunity to ask questions. I'm a senior banker with EBRD's Power and Energy Utilities team. I've been in Istanbul for about 5 years. EBRD has been working in Turkey for about 6. Very quickly, this is what EBRD is about. We do act very often like a commercial bank, even though we are a development institution. What that means is we do not do subsidized loans, we do commercial loans. We help the transition to a full market economy and prioritize private sector investment. About 80% of our portfolio is in private sector, although we can do sovereign deals as well, public sector. And we do support, but we do not replace the private investment. So we like to be additional. We like to do projects that otherwise would not happen without us. And obviously, we are all about environmental sustainability. As a multilateral, that's very important to us. We operate in 35 countries. 31 are from the original group, and 4 are new from our recent expansion in Middle East and North Africa with Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, and Tunisia. This is EBRD in Turkey as of the end of last year. So we have been working in Turkey since the end of 2008, beginning 2009. Through 2013, we had 116 operations signed in Turkey for a total of about 3.5 billion euros, about 2.9 of which had already been disbursed. I can tell you that as of the end of October, those figures had moved up by about 700 million euros each. So the totals now are about 4.2 and 3.5. We expect to maybe close the year with about 1.2 to 1.3 billion euros of new investments in total. Now, in terms of EBRD's ability to finance projects, we can do essentially, to summarize with 2 words what is in this table, is we can do absolutely everything from non-recourse projects, non-recourse loan financing, to ordinary shares and everything in between. We can do mezzanine, we can do preferred dividends, we can finance long-term. We've done longer than 15 years. In some areas and in some countries we've gone up to 18, 20. We can do fixed and floating rate. We can do local currency. So for our Turkish corporates, we have available funding in USD, in euros, and in Turkish lira long-term. Longest we have done, I think, in Turkish lira has been 12 years. We are able to go up to 15 there. In terms of the equity side, EBRD typically takes about a 20 to 25% stake. Usually we try to keep it below 20 because we do not like to consolidate equity investments, and per IFRS reporting, anything above 20 has to be consolidated in our accounts. We can do acquisition of existing shares, but it's not something that our board prefers. We prefer to do capital increases so that the company can use our funds primarily for new investments for expansion program. If the companies have smaller needs, so for small and medium-sized enterprises who have needs for equity investments, we often have set up equity funds to actually address these needs and to make smaller investments. We have generalist equity funds, and we have special equity funds. In Turkey, for example, we are the largest investor in a clean energy transition fund of Crescent Capital, which is dedicated only to renewable energies. So we can do it both. Obviously, as we are a financial investor in most of these projects, we're not going to interfere with the company's day-to-day operations. It's not our job. It is important for us that the corporate governance is in place. It's also important that we have a clarified exit route with the main investor up front, because we need to know 7, 8, 10 years down the road how are we going to exit for this. At the end of the day, we're there to help the companies grow and develop when they need capital. But we're not strategic players that will stay in the business 20 or 30 years. What we provide both on the loan and equity side, but especially on the equity side, and we have tested it in other countries, and luckily we have not had to test it in Turkey, is also political and regulatory risk mitigation. Because EBRD's shareholders are all of its member countries and a number of other countries, actually. We're owned by 65 governments. We do have channels of dialogue open with both the governments and the regulatory bodies in every country, and we're able to discuss with them and address issues that investors may have and our investee companies may have at any time. So this is, I think, where we bring some of our added value on the equity side of the projects. Some quick structures of how essentially EBRD would do the financing. This slide demonstrates EBRD's what we call the AB loan product. It's usually done with EBRD and international banks, and it offers essentially any international bank EBRD's preferred creditor status, which protects from risks of currency convertibility and transferability. So this is on that side of the screen. You have EBRD providing 25 to 35% of the project costs as an A lender. As a B lender, or even as a parallel financier sometimes, we have a co-financing bank to provide the rest of the projects, and then the main sponsor as a majority shareholder and maybe a minority shareholder can provide the equity for the project, and on the minority side, EBRD can come in as an equity investor. It is possible for us. Like I said, we do not take stakes of more than 20%, so we're always a minority investor on this one. This is now, instead of a project finance, this is financing an existing corporate. This is just to give you the idea that EBRD can finance existing corporates, not just specific project finance. This is not a problem for us. And we can do either a senior loan or a mezzanine loan or any kind of financing with mid and long term and secured by the assets of the project entity. And we have, when I say limited options for local currency financing, what it essentially means is that we do not provide local currency financing in any country we work with. For example, if you were to go to my home country of Albania, you will not find financing in Albanian lek. We do finance in rubles, we do finance in zlotys in Poland, in leu in Romania, we do finance in Turkish lira, we do finance in Kazakh tenge, and so on. But it's some of our countries, not all of them. This is essentially the structure, how it would work, a very simple structure of EBRD coming into the equity. Majority shareholder is the sponsor of the project, and the EBRD can have a put option, for example, to the sponsor to sell the shares after a pre-agreed period of time at a pre-agreed financial formula, which may be based on net asset value, on EBITDA, on something else, which allows EBRD together with the sponsor to essentially take the full project development or corporate development risk. If the corporate does badly, we lose money. If the corporate does well, we make money, which is all that equity is about. Now, I'll focus for a couple of minutes on what we feel makes the wind projects bankable, because at the end of the day, we're talking about wind. Obviously, one very important thing for banks is that the legal and regulatory regime should be sound. Now, in Turkey, luckily, because there haven't been bankruptcies in the energy sector that I know of, anything significant, the legal system is untested. Is untested relatively, so we do not know what would happen if we had to go through enforcement. As a banker, you pray that always you never have to find out. In terms of permits and licenses, obviously one needs clear procedures, timely issuance, division of responsibilities amongst various bodies. I will not focus on this much because I'm sure that my colleague from the investor side encounters these problems every day and can speak about it more than I can. Banks in general do not have to face so much the permitting and licensing issues because they get involved when the project is permitted. Now, what is more important from the banking side is obviously the contractual relations. They need to be sound and they need to be watertight. Ideally, a bank wants a long-term power purchase agreement. In Turkey, you don't have this, although we do have the feed-in tariff mechanism, which provides a feed-in tariff guaranteed cash flow for up to 10 years. It has not been used very much in Turkey up to recently, simply because the market price has been better than the feed-in tariff. At the moment, we're seeing more people using it, but I'm quite sure, given that Turkish developers are big risk takers, the moment that the market price hovers a little bit above the feed-in tariff, we're going to move to the market again. EPC and O&M contracts are very important to banks, and I'm talking this now when we talk about project finance in wind. I always think in terms of absolute non-recourse. So the risks are shared up front. There is no completion guarantees. There is no debt service guarantees during operation. Essentially, the bank and the investor sit together up front, and they mitigate all the possible risks, and the banks share the risk with the sponsor. In that case, obviously, a strong EPC contract, which covers the construction risk, is important, and a sound O&M contract with an experienced operator is important for the operational period in terms of availability, in terms of performance, and so on. Talking about the feed-in tariff and the PPAs, obviously, there is a feed-in tariff at the moment. So far, sponsors have preferred to go to the market, simply because the average market price has usually been above the feed-in tariff. And the feed-in tariff has not really been making a lot of sense for the sponsors. This year now, the local content premium has become actually available after a couple of years of trying to work out the secondary regulation. That would possibly help with the stream of revenues. And now we're seeing some sponsors that, at least on the wind side, they are preferring to go to this feed-in tariff at the moment, given that I'll give them about $87 per megawatt hour, and actually the average market price at the moment is about 75, so it's below the feed-in tariff. However, that's available only for 5 years. In year 6, you're again moving on to a situation where the market price, even with today's prices, which are low by historical Turkish standards, the market price is above the feed-in tariff, and you run into the same issue of trying to structure a project on the market price. And that's where sort of like the long-term PPA comes into play, if possible. Now, what do the banks look for specifically when they're financing a wind project on top of the EPC and the O&M, which I just spoke about? First is obviously the measurements. You need a sufficient measurement of resource to properly address the risk. And you need an experienced measurement firm to do this for you. Most of the banks will look for a minimum of 12 months of measurements. Longer is better, obviously. That's number one. Number two is that we usually like to work with more experienced sponsors. For quite some time in Turkey, there has been a situation where there have been a lot of license holders which have the license, but they don't really have the experience to develop the project. Obviously, from a bank perspective, you try to do a project as non-recourse as possible, but part of the mitigation of the risks up front is that you need an experienced interlocutor on the other side, an experienced sponsor who can actually understand you and work together with you. And if the project goes into trouble, then to discuss as to how we both get out of it. The third important thing is proven technology. The banks just hate the idea of anybody walking in and saying, we have this new prototype turbine that we want to try on this project. That's not what non-recourse finance is about. You need proven technology with a good track record. And obviously you need the right one. The local content is good in the sense that it offers a higher feed-in tariff to the investors, but it also has a little bit, it may give the incentive to certain sponsors to actually go for not necessarily the right type of equipment because it would give them the right type of feed-in tariff. And obviously, the selection of equipment needs to be based on sound procurement, needs to be based on the characteristics of the sites, on resource, on wind availability, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not that simple. And sometimes the local content may just make the sponsor go for the wrong selection. The banks will also look for very detailed technical and financial due diligence. International lenders like us, and especially multilaterals, are going to look also for a very, very detailed environmental study because we're required to by our shareholders. And obviously, we would like to finance a project that has no disputes related to any of the key licenses, permisses, etc. This is basically just a very quick overview of what EBRD has done as a power team to date, about 10 billion euros over 200 projects of own financing. As a power team, we invest over 1 billion euros regularly every year now in all our countries of operations. And we have a new focus now in the Southeastern Mediterranean. And we started in Morocco and Jordan with our first investments, a couple of investments in Egypt this year, despite the civil unrest going on, and so on and so forth. This is essentially the split by sector, whereas you can see about half of the money has gone into power generation, and about 1/4 of it has gone into renewable power. We started in renewable in 2008, so I think we've done reasonably well building up our renewable portfolio. It's been holding also up well, even though renewables in some of the countries, especially the new EU candidates, have issues with the feed-in tariffs these days. And this is the split in EBRD in terms of renewable financing. You can see that even though we've been in Turkey for a shorter period of time than most of our other countries, Turkey is third at least by cumulative volume in terms of what we have invested in renewables. It's been exclusively wind for Turkey as direct investment for EBRD. In fact, wind is about 3/4 of our portfolio as direct lending, and these days we're trying to look for ways to expand more into geothermal, solar, and biomass, which are less, let's say, mainstream technologies. This is basically a quick overview of a selection of projects that EBRD has done to date. As you see, it is just there to illustrate for you that we essentially have tried to finance wind in any country. And if you look at the sponsor group, we do not discriminate. So we finance with both international and local sponsors. In fact, if you look in the case of Turkey, the two projects that we have financed in wind are both with local groups, so with Enerjisa, which is actually 50-50 owned local and international, with Zorlu Energy. And these are actually the two wind farms in a bit more detail. This was actually the rotor wind farm of Zorlu was our first project in Turkey back in 2009, co-financed with IFC and EIB, also with HSBC and Denizbank. We provided 45 million euros for the project. The project actually even won the onshore wind farm of the year by Project Finance magazine for 2009. Luckily, it's been going well. It's been repaying on time, which is what most banks are happy with these days. The second project is the Baraj wind farm of Enerjisa. This we did in 2012. We have done direct lending for 100 million euros for our own account. And we have a 35 million euro participation from foreign banks, which at the moment are UniCredit and Raiffeisen International. It's a 12-year loan. As you know, Enerjisa is the largest player in the sector. It was, I think from a banking perspective, it was not a very difficult transaction for us, but we were quite happy with actually having financed such a large wind farm. What we do when we're not able to finance a project directly because we have a limited number of staff and resources. In fact, if I'm to be honest with you, EBRD with its 40-something offices now in all its countries of operation, its headquarters has staff of less than 1,500 people, and that includes also the security that receives you when you come to our door. We have set up especially the sustainable energy financing facilities, and these have been quite successful actually in Turkey. Essentially, we use these facilities for small and medium-sized renewables and for energy efficiency projects to reach SMEs and also to reach residential clients. And what we do with this is that we try to support the local commercial banks, our banking partners, into providing financing for residential energy efficiency, small and mid-sized renewables, etc. Essentially, EBRD does provide credit lines and some grant investments to commercial banks who then will own lend to the project. And we also, through donor-funded contracts, we have in place a consultancy assignment to support both with project preparation and with the monitoring of how these projects go after on lending. I will not go into a lot more detail in this because, again, I think my banking colleagues from VAKF and Ish are going to speak about this because they have access to these funds. These programs so far have been about €1 billion. They have been very successful. Most of the funds are utilized for financing somewhere around 40-45 sub-projects. And at the moment, we're going through a process internally of expanding this program with a few hundred million more because it looks like the funds are in high demand. And this is a quick summary of essentially our sustainable energy initiative, which we started back in 2006. We have financed over 10 billion euros of sustainable energy projects, which is renewable and energy efficiency. 35% of that has come in Turkey, whether directly or through our partner banks. And this is essentially the figures that you see in Turkey, including an equivalent saving of about 5 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions, which is more or less equivalent to about 2% of what Turkey emitted in 2010. This is basically our targets of what EBRD intends to be doing going forward. More renewable, helping with the Genco portfolio prioritization, other greenfield generation. So those are our strategic targets for the next 4 to 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you for this brief presentation.
We'll get the questions at the very end, but any question? Maybe we can ask a couple of questions, if any. Maybe I can ask a couple of questions, especially about mezzanines. You mentioned in your presentation, as you all know, mezzanine is not something that is applicable a lot in Turkey. EBRD, what you are doing in terms of mezzanine, would you briefly elaborate on this?
I mean, in Turkey, we haven't been able to do much because it's also a matter of demand and it's also a matter of price. Like I said, mezzanine is a different type of risk, so basically look for a different type of reward. But we can do all kinds of structures. So mezzanine can be a simple subordinated debt, which essentially gets paid either regularly or as a bullet at the end of the transaction, depending on the cash flow availability after the senior debt has been serviced. Sometimes it can be, let's say, a bullet loan with a participation in the profits of the project. So if there are profits, you get some interest out of it. If there are no profits, you don't get anything. So it can take many forms, but it varies on a case-by-case basis depending on what the investors want. We have done this in other countries. We haven't had the opportunity to do it in Turkey yet, but it's available as a product from us.
And what I would like to also say is that EBRD do not consider just as a finance institution, also as a financial institution, as an EU institution, of course, and especially the climate environment is also important because they provide support to us by issuing some reports. And of course, especially it's important for the other investors at the international level, especially the foreign companies, international companies, all consider them as significant reports. And from time to time, therefore, as the ministry, not only for financing purposes, but we also make use of the field experience of EBRD. We have also from the Development Bank, our colleague from the Development Bank. Maybe, you know, in the EBRD, around 50% of the portfolio is represented by the energy. And this number will increase because there will be new schemes to be introduced. Similarly, Turkish Development Bank in the last year, at the same time, allocated huge resources for energy. I guess up to 60%, if I'm not mistaken, the share of energy. So we have the head of the department. They also have a stand at the exhibition area if you wish to get more information on this. From City Belgium, first of all, thank you very much for joining us. You are a public investment bank. So, what are you doing as a development bank of Turkey? What are your resources, and to what extent you have different credit utilities? It's not only technical, you have multiple schemes. So maybe you can say a couple of words. Thank you. I also would like to extend my gratitude to all of you. First of all, with regards to Turkish Development Bank, maybe you can put the slides on. A couple of words about the institution. The Turkish Development Bank in 1975 first established as the Industrial Investment Bank, and in 1988 its name is changed into Development Bank of Turkey. Almost all the capital is the treasurers, and we are just actually a specialty bank, better to say. Our bank, as Murat already discussed, is just providing loans for all industries. I mean, it could be energy efficiency, it could be industry, it could be tourism. We actually also have some project assessment reports, and we grant credits. Besides that, during the project assessment activities, we also have quite a highly qualified team, because project assessment report is something very important, and there are three pillars. We have the economic, technical assessment, and the financial assessment, and we have a team of experts doing this, and each and every project is being assessed by the team of our bank, and besides the credit appraisal, so we also offer technical consultancy, feasibility studies, and economic and financial assessments, both local and internationally. Also, the other banking activities are the case. The financing, if you ask for the bank, as you all know, from the international finance institutions, from BRD, from the Islamic Development Bank, from KFW. So we have received long-term funds, and we are just directing them to these different forms. Now, of course, it is the wind that is the topic of the panel, and wind energy and what is the potential. For the last 2 days, in the seminars and the sessions, you all know about these figures, and there's already a wind map of Turkey, and it is 7 meters per second based on a 7 meter per second of a measurement. But of course, especially when you consider the developments in the technology, even if it is under that, we know that the projects can be feasible. And even if we have taken this as the basis, we have 48,000 megawatt worth of a potential for Turkey. And by the end of July, it is almost 3,000 megawatts, but by now it is already the case, and they are contributing to the economy. I told you about the technological developments. Again, as a financial expert, for 48,000 megawatts of potential, and we have already used 3,500. There is a technology, and we have a reduction in costs, and we have higher efficiency. It means that there is actually an opportunity for the investors, and therefore it means as the financiers, we also have got a lot to do. So we also should be taking our own share out of this, and this is how we have to adjust our infrastructure. And so we continue to work on this. Also, for the entire world, it is 53,000 terawatt hour of potential, and 318,000 of megawatt is the only installed capacity, and 1/3 of this is in Europe. That's to say in our neighbors. And it means that we've got a lot to do also for them. I don't want to take too much of your time with these figures, but in the world, again, in terms of installed capacity, the leader is China, and followed by the United States with 61,000, and the third, Germany, with 34,000 megawatts of installed capacity. Again, in terms of the resources that we use in our portfolio, we have the World Bank, we have the European Investment Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and the others, as I've already told you. Well, speaking frankly, when we say renewable energy, in particular in terms of financing, everything is connected to each other. Before 2005, for example, the banks, for example, had almost nothing in their portfolio in terms of renewable energy, because we have the new law after 2005, and the private sector started to invest on this, and this is the reason why the banks started to work on this. We started in 2004, in 2005, but to be frank, I should say, it is starting by the end of 2008 and 2009. We also, as a bank, have portfolio for wind energy and for renewables, actually. And this is what we're also trying to do. Just a couple of figures I'd like to share with you. Up to 178 projects that we have assessed so far, and 421 of them we have allocated projects, and for 71 of them we have extended credit. And I'm proud to say is that there is nothing uncompleted, and all our projects completed, and 49 projects in total. They are now economically functional, and 663 megawatt worth of renewable energy. And so we are more than proud to be a part of this. Of course, these figures are not good, and there is actually the need to have more than this, and especially for financing purposes, we are trying our best. And we're trying our best, I would like to say, for this. And now, from the project financing part, I would like to say a couple of words. Now, for a banker, the most important factor for project finance is actually to properly identify the investment costs. This is the most important thing, in my opinion. And the second thing is that at the same time, you have to grant the credit over the proper production costs. In other words, after generation, there will be a generation cost and a price, and you have to also set it accordingly. In wind, we are doing much better when compared to the others, because according to the legislation, the measurement duration is also to be increased, and so we'll have more reliable data. So we now have the chance for making much more accurate calculations as a banker. And what is specific about wind is that the 80% of the initial cost is machinery and equipment. And as this is the case, this is actually a safe haven for you. Only in 20% there could be some variations. In, for example, hydroelectricity power plants, it is different. It is maximum 20% that is the equipment, depending on the equipment to be used, 80% construction. In kilometers of an area you're doing construction, it doesn't matter how well you calculate, there could be several unexpected things on the pipeline. And therefore, I believe that especially it is wind among the renewable energy, and also the solar that is the most eligible and favorable one for crediting. And of course, there could be different discussions about the guarantee and what is going to happen in the next part of the project financing and so on. We have a stand outside, and if you have some specific questions, you can come and ask. So that's all I want to say. I don't know if you have a question from you or from the panel. Thank you. What is clear is that you just have one WPP financed, I guess. But as much as I know, especially in the last year, the development bank turned into an energy bank, and even a renewable energy bank, better to say. And I'm sure that they will continue with this high performance. So in renewable energy, as the figures also indicated, especially for HPP you actually had, but hopefully in the future it will be WPP concentrated one, as Satu also stated. In the coming period, it's not only 7 meters per second, but even the lower figures will also be financed. It means that the development bank is at a certain technical level so far. As the project assessment, of course, looking at the development bank and how they're allocating the credit, and their credit appraisal reports are also very technical and detailed, and they have a group of experts working together. And from this perspective, next year, just like we gathered here, and I'm sure that there will be a huge performance increase during the next year's presentation. I guess maybe it is just, because you are mostly focusing on energy. Now let's continue with Vakıflar Bank. And we have Metin from Vakıflar Bank. And there is TURSEF and MITSEF, and about the credit guarantee fund. It is, it is a project finance, of course, as the thing that we pay attention to, as the DG. And while you're providing financing for a project, and what do we exactly mean by qualified project? I mean, what is a good project from the perspective of a bank? Yes, please. Before I start, I'd like to say a couple of words about Vakıflar Bank. We have 879 branches so far, and we have 3 foreign branches and 23 regional directorates, and we have 15,000 employees, and the asset size 138.5 billion TL, and the cash credits 91.5, and 60.5 billion Turkish liras of this corresponds to the commercial loans. Back to energy now. Satu already discussed it, so I will just skip it, and especially it is 1.6 trillion US dollars worth of an energy investment in the world in 2013, and almost 15% for the renewable energy. And from the projections of different institutions, we know that there will be an increasing trend so far. Again, for the installed capacity in Turkey by now for wind, it is 3,000, and especially for those to be completed soon, it's going to be in total 4,500 megawatts. The financing is already completed for this megawatt. In 2023, the goal is 20,000 megawatts of wind power. Just with a simple projection, in the coming 9 years, there will be 19 billion euros worth of an investment requirement. I mean, the financing requirement, of course. To what extent will be the equity? To what extent will be just sponsored? We don't know. Probably 25% of an equity, probably 5 billion euros of a total equity requirement. Oh, I'm speaking about reaching the goal of 20,000 megawatts, of course. In wind energy, from investment down to operation, what do we have? Because it goes down to operation and maintenance even. There are a couple of steps, but they are interrelated to each other, and one is affecting the other. The banks are at the finance side in here, but it doesn't mean that the banks are not interested in the other steps of the process, because for financing, all the other steps should be fulfilled properly. And what different instruments do we have for financing? The project finance. In project finance, in general, for WPPs, I would like to say, the necessary licenses, permits, I mean, the grid connection, environmental impact assessment, all should be proper. As Satu also stated, we need qualified measurement performed at a certain duration, because it is based on these measurements that you're making projections about the yield of the project and so on. And especially in the projects, licensed projects, it requires a year of a measurement. But of course, it's not only about making the measurement itself, also it must be a qualified measurement. And at the same time, the analysis, I mean, it's not only about receiving the data. What is important is that um, it also should project for the future. And the banks in general are using 7.3 dollar cent. And of course, as even as they are underreact them, it could be, but the peak hours, especially in wind, is not something possible at all times. And also there is the contribution share as a result of the tenders completed in the 2010. Also, they have to be considered accordingly. And therefore, there's also the investment return for the project. These are all assessed. And then there is a certain equity considered and the suggested guarantees. Just with a couple of words, what we are doing as Vakıf Bank, but I failed to use this remote controller. Now, in project analysis, what we're doing is very similar to what is being done in the industry in general. It's project-based. I mean, but this is mostly 20% equity share that we look for. The project efficiency is important, and the credibility and the support of the sponsor to the project is important. And it is possible to increase this equity share, or from time to time it can be less. And the guarantees are mainly, it is just could be the sponsor, it could be the mortgage, and of course it can vary, but it's again based on the project. This is how we decide. Environmental and social impact assessment is extremely important to us, and we are among the 15 banks in the sustainability index announced by the stock exchange. It was important to us also in the past, but it is also important. It is MetSef and TURSEF projects that I'll be speaking about, but why the international finance institutions funds are important to us, I would like to say that. We're a deposit bank, and then we collect deposit and we grant loan. It is the credit deposit ratio is 1.15, so it is 115 worth of loan given for 100 of a deposit. This is mainly because we actually cannot extend our credit base. So as the bank, so as to be able to give loans and credits to the industry, we need financing other than the deposits. And of course, international financing is extremely important from this perspective. And as you all know, the deposit is also very with a short due date. Term is so short, it's 3 months. And therefore, it may not be so possible to finance quite long-term projects, because especially the long-term loans received from abroad are mostly much favorable, both for us and for our customers. And of course, especially, we also have the chance to find out about international practices and get technical know-how from them. And within the framework of the renewable energy finance from EBRD, we also have ANDE. Thank you very much in particular for your support as EBRD, because these two programs, MetSef, TURSEF, very successful. And we have MetSef and TURSEF. MetSef is the middle scale, and TURSEF is the Turkish against sustainable energy financing project. For MetSef, it is mainly increasing energy saving and to reduce carbon emission, and therefore to strengthen the renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. These are not only specific to renewable energy, they also cover the projects for energy efficiency as well. With also the support of EIB, we have almost €1 billion worth of financing, and we have there's Vakıf Bank, us, and 6 other banks. It is renewable energy, energy from waste, and industrial energy efficiency. For eligibility criteria, who can apply for this? It must be a private sector institution. I mean, the public share must be under a certain level, and should be eligible for crediting depending on the participating banks. I mean, the applicants are being assessed according to the eligibility criteria for each and every bank, and there's also a short list of EBRD, and they should not be a part of this. In terms of the credit amount, it's 5 million to 4 million euros, and depending on the approval by EBRD, it's possible to go up to 50, but it should not exceed 50 million. But of course, it's all a process. Again, from time to time, it's possible to exceed this credit line. And there is a certain grace period, and also there is an appropriate term payment depending on the cash flow of the project, and some again purchasing requirements are the case. Again, there is a need for measurement and modeling prepared by experienced experts. There must be a grid connection, and the total installed capacity is expected to be between 5 to 50 megawatts. And of course, at least 1 year of a wind measurement is the case. This is also what is specified in the legislation. And the measurement should be at least at a height of 30 meters at height. And NPV and IRR should be at a certain level. Before granting the credit, also all necessary authorizations, permits, and licenses should be completed before installation and operation. Of course, international financial institutions, as you all know, pay a lot of attention to environmental and social impact assessments. Not only EBRD, all IFIs are doing so. There must be no environmental and social impact, or at least there must be no debate. By saying debate, I mean, let's better to say a controversy about this. I mean, in general, there could be some discussions, of course, but it also may cover the expenses for grid connection. Within the framework of MITSAF, so far, 513 million euros worth of amount for renewable energy, and 204 for WPPs. TWEC now. TWEC is financing more small-scale projects. As you can see, that is for mainly SMEs. I mean, especially for small-scale renewable energy and energy efficiency investments. TWEC 1 and TWEC 2. TWEC 1 already completed program and successfully completed in Turkey, and now we have this TWEC 2, $265 million worth. It's again Vakıf Bank and the other 3 participating banks. And for renewable energy, the upper limit is 5 million euros. Similar to the other as eligibility criteria, a private sector company, but also must be an SME, but SME according to EU. It's not according to Turkish definition, therefore it's an EU definition, and under 250 employees and annual turnover less than 50 million euros on the total assets less than 43 million euros. So this is the EU definition. So this is the SME definition by EU. So they can be eligible. Again, they should be eligible for credits again according to the criteria of the participating banks. Again, should not be in the band list of EBRD. And this time the total installed capacity can be maximum 10 megawatts, and for each €1 worth of investment, there's a need for 1.3 kilowatt hour at least or annual electricity generation. This is the technical eligibility for within TWEC 1. If I'm not mistaken, it was 200 million, I guess, 200 million, and it was $82 million and 10 million for WPP. Under TWEC 2, it's an ongoing program. It's not completed yet. 47 million euros of an energy financing and 5 million for wind energy financing, 5.4. So, before concluding my words, what could be the alternatives? Maybe I can say a couple of words about this. In particular, um, for low megawatt projects, and as you all know, we have a credit guarantee fund for SMEs in particular, and there are certain warranty. I mean, for example, a credible company, but if, for example, they have some difficulty in providing for the warranty in particular, this is why we have it. And from their own equity and with the support of the treasury, it is also from the credit guarantee fund, it is possible to, for example, it is 1 million Turkish liras of a guarantee. And for renewable energy, you know, it's something very important for our country. And so as to support these projects, you know, there is actually the government support. And I believe that if, for example, as the financiers, it would be perfect if it is possible to do something like that. It also will be pleasing for the industry as well as the banks. Of course, we are binding by the legislation. There's a credit and equity ratio. We have the provisions, the general special provisions for each credit. There are certain criteria specified in the regulation. But these are the things that, I mean, somehow regulates our appetite. For example, if the general provision is lower when I grant a credit, it is something that affects my cost, so I can actually be in the favor of those. I guess it was the end of last year that there was actually a specific regulation for the SME credits. Maybe for renewable energy, it also would be nice to have such a facility. I mean, because it will be win-win both for the banks and for the others. So this also can encourage the banks for renewable energy. That's all. But if you have any question, I'll be more than happy to answer. And we also have a stand outside, so you can get more detailed information if any. Thank you. Of course, with regards to SAF and MITSAF, we had the chance to receive a lot of information. Of course, İşbank is the next colleague. They're under the same program. But what I observed from EBRD in the Development Bank of Turkey, looking at it is over 50%, almost 60% of share for renewable energy. At Vakıflar Bank, hopefully, in the coming term, there also will be more use of the credits for renewable energy. And this is our expectation from the bank. İşbank, of course, as you know, allocated a huge resource for energy. They now have more works on this. Also in our national projects at the same time, they provide us a lot of support. And our colleague is Gülyüz, and especially specific to wind, what you would say, especially what is the approach of the bank for the renewables in general, what are the problems that they experience. And of course, meanwhile, as already discussed, environmental sensitivities, they are also very important. So once again, they will probably also focus on this. My colleagues already provided with so many figures, so just a couple of things, I will skip them. Now, the International Energy Agency's recent report, Turkey until 2020, in the field of renewable energy, in terms of installed capacity, I mean, Turkey is going to be one of the three countries, I mean, together with Germany and the UK, to increase installed capacity the most. And for wind, 8.2 gigawatt for wind only. That is the projection in the same report. The report also stated that so as to reach that target, there is a good appetite, but the biggest challenge is actually about the quantity and the cost of the financing. Therefore, it's important, as also discussed in the report. Now, in Turkey so far, $4 billion of financing, both local and international, for energy so far. But of course, there is a need to increase it a lot. $100 billion, some saying, some others are uttering some different figures, but how we are going to increase it and what are the challenges that we have here? First of all, as İşbank, for wind so far, what is the financing that we provide? 500 megawatts worth of project that we finance and over $400 million just for over that amount, but just for wind. Of course, it is much, much higher in the other energy projects. I mean, so still, wind is a very small share in our financing, and we wish to increase it. Why we prefer WPPs? First of all, we have shorter period, less operational cost, and in terms of YEKDEM, again, they can make use of the cost guarantee, and therefore they are advantages for us. And at the same time, they are important also for the economy of the country. I mean, the capacity use is not that much high when compared to the TPPs, but especially when the wind is high, especially it actually reduces the requirement for those that buy some foreign currency, so it contributes to the current deficit because this is a structural problem for Turkey, as you all know. So it has a huge contribution for the current deficit, which is the biggest issue for the country. But of course, there are also challenges for financing of WPPs, as Metin already discussed. The Turkish banks, especially, they have done challenges in foreign exchange loans, especially when it's long term, over 10 years, 12 years. We can have some difficulties on this. And the purchasing guarantee in YEKDEM is limited to 10 years. This is problematic to us, as you all know. It is only, YEKDEM covers only the first 10 years, and this is 7.2 meters second, which is actually a guarantee that is lower when compared to the worldwide practices. So this cannot be beyond 10 or 12 years of a loan that we give. Therefore, the credit quantities are also limited as well. Of course, per megawatt, there is actually a reduction in cost, but still expensive. I mean, people need higher credit lines, and they need longer terms, of course. This long term, how it is actually covered? I mean, it is mostly the for example, bank credits and so on that, like in Denmark, like in Germany, and it's mostly from the insurance. I mean, institutions of the other countries that we refer to, because we have some difficulty in financing it only with our own sources, and of course. Also, this is not a 100% solution to this problem. Why? Because there's an insurance premium as a result of this. I mean, there is the investment cost, but on the top of this, we have the insurance premium, and this is resulting in an increase in the investment cost. And this insurance premium is actually calculated according to the country risk, but still, there is also a certain yield that is projected by the local commercial bank. And therefore, this expectation is demanded from the investor. So in short, it's actually a huge cost, I would like to say. It's okay, it's a good financing opportunity in the long run and so on. But because of this insurance premium issue, you are somehow undermining this. And it's only limited to a certain portion of the Ford equipment. I mean, there is still a Turkish bank is an important pillar in financing. I mean, at least for the financing of the expenses in Turkey. And of course, the Turkish banks, again, plays a critical role in here. Why? Because they know about the dynamics of the country. They know very well the legislation, and they're all highly qualified, so they are much more flexible for the demands of the investors. I mean, they can respond quickly to the demands of the investors. So a Turkish bank is actually the critical component as well. Also, we have good relations as well with the other banks. Therefore, in the medium term, I believe that we will have more increase for credits for the wind. Another good one, it is Metsef Tursef, Proparpo, as always discussed by Metin. We are also using it a lot. Maybe they are relatively low among the entire investment cost, but still important to us. And I don't think this brings additional burden for the investors because they have certain hesitations when they are saying, what is the additional liability for me if I, for example, make use of this financing? Yes, right, there is the environmental and social criteria. That's right. But you know, Turkish banks are also very sensitive. Therefore, it's not an additional burden on them. I mean, the investors should not think so. And the other thing is, of course, the equity side, which is critical to us. In these investments, as you all know, there's the EPC contract. It's not that much widespread in the industry. So, especially for the investment period risks, how we are going to manage them is important, and it is the investors that should assume the responsibility. I mean, we have a minimum equity ratio, of course, it varies from project to project, but at the same time, any cost increase in the investment should be covered by the investor. We're speaking about the investment period. I mean, it's very difficult to do an non-recourse financing as there's no international EPC. So it's something like the completion guarantee, because we ask for such a guarantee. And therefore, the financial strength of the investor, the track record of the investor, and their experience, especially in the wind industry, these are important issues to us. What can be the solutions for this? You know, there's a certain accumulation of investment in Turkey, but it is not adequate. It is okay. We have 2023 vision for the 20,000 megawatts. It's okay, but we don't have the capital size required to achieve this goal, and something clear cut. And that's why foreign partnership is so important. Like we have GEM from Enerjisa, and with a foreign partner, how they are acting and what are the advantages of working with a foreign partner. He will elaborate on this, but it is important to attract foreign investors, and because it is very critical, and we appreciate this a lot. It's not only from financial perspective. I mean, in terms of equity, it's important to for foreign capital in the country, also for know-how purposes. I mean, if there's a foreign partner, I mean, between the Turkish strategic investor and having the foreign strategic partner, and if they cooperate in the Turkish projects, this is what we support for. But of course, there's a need to have a good climate environment. The macroeconomic indicators or the legal framework, of course, should be much more favorable, and I know that it will be. Another, from the side of the equity, and is actually to, I mean, not to try to do a big project at once, but phase out the projects, complete the first phase and with the operational yield, and finance the second phase, third phase, and so on. This is also something that reduces the equity risk for both sides. Another important challenge in financing is about wind measurement, already discussed by the panelists. Of course, we ask people to work with highly qualified technical consultants in this respect. Very reliable technical reports are required, otherwise it's very difficult to grant finance. Measurement is very important. And also about foreign capital, I also would like to say a couple of words about the bureaucratic processes. Especially sometimes it could be long, the paperwork. For example, for forests, sometimes you wait for months in several of the investments. And this is not good for the foreign investors. It may be bad for their appetite. It's also difficult for us for the financing. Why? Because the market conditions are changing, and in a very short period of time, things can change immediately and totally. And so we also believe that the bureaucratic procedures should be facilitated. The other thing is high, again, contribution share. This is also critical for the banks. And lastly, from the side of the Turkish banks, what is important is the environmental and social impact assessment. It is not like in the past. I mean, because in the past there was the understanding that the international banks always pay attention to these things, but not the case for the Turkish banks. No. As İşbank, for example, we now have different ethical approach. We actually have a different approach for environmental and social issues. So the projects are analyzed for each and any type of risk. Of course, wind is clean energy, renewable energy, but it's not totally harmless for the environment. Especially it is the noise and the dust during erection and during operation, again, mainly by appearance and bird death. So may lead to problems. Therefore, we are mostly getting technical support from the technical experts that we rely on, and we're closely following it. Of course, from time to time, they also may lead to social issues as well. For example, because of site use, there could be some losses in the agricultural fields, or sometimes there could be loss of income to local community, and for not having the husbandry activities. And so somehow it's important in particular to maybe provide for some alternative livelihoods for the local community. And it's important to take such measures as well, and we are following them carefully, and we ask them to be fulfilled. So that's all I can say. You know, our principles are very similar to the others, so I guess there's no point to continue more. Thank you. Of course, especially what the problems are from the perspective of the bankers, you also provide us some additional information. Also from the investor side this time. We have a professional from the investor side, from Enerjisa, Cem. They are working with 29 banks. So it's actually a different gift, I guess, to be able to work with 29 different banks at the same time. So, I mean, it's already a very complicated project. It's a different thing, and dealing with 29 different institutions, and it's actually another thing. I mean, so in particular, what we want from you is, again, from the investor side, what your perspective is, and the targets, the objectives, and what are actually the different costs and the other issues. So you'll be providing us a different perspective, and this is good. It will be useful both for the finance side, and it also will be useful for the investors, I guess, as a professional, how a project should be financed. So quite an exceptional guest, I would say. So the floor is yours. Thank you. I work at Enerjisa, and I am in charge of the financing. And in 1996, it's a Sabancı Group company as the co-generation. And then after that, Sabancı Group identified energy as strategic, and with Australian partners started some significant investments. And in 2013, with German Aeons, acquired the Australian share, and with 50% of shares both. Therefore, we are actually a leading energy company in all different chains. Now, from the generation side, it is 2,800 megawatt, 1,300 megawatt already under construction, and we have 3 distribution and regions, and we are covering 25% of the entire Turkish population for distribution, and 20% of the energy sales by Enerjisa only. And now we have very distinguished bankers with us on the panel, and they have already discussed about all the problems in actually the financing of the energy projects, but I'm the investor, and from another perspective I will speak. Now, before doing that, of course, there are certain challenges, but it is important to overcome these challenges. And but of course, maybe a couple of information about the cost of these challenges to Turkey. As the other panels already mentioned, we have a wind capacity with the potential of 48,000 megawatt, and it is 3,500 megawatt, the existing capacity. This is by the end of September, the most updated, and it is only 3% of the energy consumption that we have for this. So 79% from the fossil fuels. And Turkey, especially for the hydrocarbon reserves, we are right at the middle of the hydrocarbon, I mean, by 75%. I mean, we are right in the middle of the hydrocarbon reserves in the world, and it's all surrounded, but it is only 5% from our domestic, again, use. And the annual cost is $60 billion US dollars, the energy import, and we have a growing population. It's going higher and higher. Of course, it is not only the economic costs that we are speaking about, and I mean, speaking about use of wind energy, we also have the supply security issue, the environment, especially supply security is important, and plus the environmental issues. Maybe they are not discussed a lot as much as the others, but in the long run, it's important, and I believe all the stakeholders should work together so as to eliminate the problems that I'll be discussing in my presentation, so we can make better use of this potential, and we'll have the chance to get rid of these costs. Now, very briefly, now the wind potential of the country, and the other panelists provide different figures. Maybe, I mean, they're parallel, but we have a supply security strategy document, and the 2023 target is 20 gigawatt. And unfortunately, it looks quite aggressive by now, because so far, looking at the performance of the industry, I mean, the capacity is not adequate enough to reach this goal. I'm sure there will be more performance, but probably it is going to be 13 or 14, we believe, up to 2023, just to be, more realistic. But still, in the coming 9 years, there is 1.8 gigawatt of an additional capacity that we require, and it is actually 2.5 billion euros per annum. And in total, it goes up to 21 billion euros. I mean, in more realistic ones, I can say it is 1.5 billion euros annual investment requirement, and probably 75 to 80% of them will be I mean, if they for just 10 billion euros worth of need for credit. Now, looking at this amount and the total financing requirement of Turkey, it is still an important portion, but of course, wind is a renewable energy form, and therefore, when compared to the other technologies, they are much more advantageous in having access to the financial utilities. Very briefly, I mean, for the financing of the wind projects, let's have a look at the models. I totally agree with my banker colleagues in here. The Turkish banks do very well know about the industry. I mean, the Turkish banks are familiar with the conditions, and therefore more than 50% is by the Turkish banks, I mean, the financing. But for ECA financing is also important because the wind projects are eligible for this, especially for the cost of machinery and equipment, and they are imported and they're high. And ECAs can be longer in term for terms and also with lower total cost that they can grant credits when compared to the Turkish banks. Now, there is also a financing model that combines ECA with the Turkish commercial banks. Therefore, the Turkish banks know better about the industry, and ECA do not have this chance. And therefore, especially in financing of WPPs, they are given commercial risk guarantee. In other words, the Turkish bank is assuming the risk of the project and giving a guarantee to ECA, and ECA either by using its own funds or by giving insurance to the foreign banks, they provide for liquidity for the industry. In this model, there are several different parties, and there's a certain insurance premium paid to the Turkish banks, and the ECAs are, I mean, getting this. I mean, they also have to pay interest to the foreign banks, but still, the total costs are competing with the costs of the Turkish banks. IFI Finance is a fourth model. Of course, Anya already provided a lot of information on this, but IFI Finance is also important in terms of prices and also in the ECA financing, they are in a certain spectrum. METSEF, TURSEF, also there are special energy funds already discussed. Now, looking at the challenges. The very first thing is about receiving the permits and licenses and the site planning. The banks, for example, do not grant the credit before getting all the licenses. And I mean, when you go to the bank, you already should have all your licenses with you, or you already have all your plans with you. And the bank is not sitting on the table, around the table with you, and they do not let the first credit to be withdrawn. And they cannot understand this problem, and they're not facing this problem. About the permits and licenses, I think the biggest problem in Turkey is bureaucratic red tape and lack of coordination among different agencies. I understand that there is a will to fix this problem, but still, I think it is important that the investors actually should do it. I mean, it doesn't change the reality for us. I mean, maybe a striking example, there is the two-May syndrome for the wind investors. And there are certain liabilities that the wind investors should fulfill before the investment, and it is May 2, 2014. It was, I mean, identified as the deadline. And several investors, so as to fulfill this, although they made their applications in advance, they could not any reply, and they cannot fulfill the requirements, and the deadline exceeded. And there were 160 investors and 5,300 megawatt worth of projects. I mean, 160 projects, and that is the capacity. It is just a delay, and it actually had a negative impact on financing. By August 2014, in the financing is just a sharp cut in financing, and this is resulting in delaying the investments eventually. Of course, what can we do so as to fix this problem? Of course, interagency coordination is a must, and you need to have some systems in place, and maybe there could be some technical interaction analysis or the forest permits, all these things. I don't know, maybe there could be a master study on this, and maybe it can be identified the locations favorable for wind energy. I mean, it should not be project-based. There must be a master plan, and people should go and invest in those locations. And or the agencies actually should be much more careful about replying to the requests. So these are the things that I have in my mind initially. As already discussed by my colleagues, the second important problem is actually lack of sound wind measurement. The Turkish banks are asking for 12 months, and it is 2 to 3 a year for the international banks. But in the industry, of course, we want the investments to go further, and we also, especially in the recent years, there are good developments about this, but still there's the need for going further, because it is not only causing difficulty in terms of the feasibility planning for the project, but if there is actually going to be a sale, and I mean, there is also the need for some short-term sales projection. I mean, because it can also lead to some errors there. I mean, this is corresponding also to the operational risk and operational errors, especially the adjustment costs important. They sometimes can go up to 15%, and they actually have to stand for this. There are some ongoing studies, I mean, for some short-term estimates. There is actually a certain project for wind potentials. But of course, for the WPPs, I guess there is the need to have another market, a conscious market to do so. I guess it's going to be the case later. Probably it will be the case later. The third problem that we have is the risks during the investment construction. I will skip this because already discussed. I mean, so as to reduce the risks, and if we, for example, the turnkey EPC contracts are a must, so as not to have the banks ask for a completion guarantee. We did it, and some others are doing as well, but of course the investors, so as to reduce the cost, rather than EPC contract with 2, 3, for example, parties, they have a construction contract and E&M contract. Of course, it increases the interfaces, so increases the risk of completion. And in terms of the sales challenges, and during the operation period, as it is stated, we have actually a lower, the $7.3 a lower purchase guarantee. We have the new renewable energy law after 2005, of course. Up to the foreign exchange rate increases last year, I would say we had very few investors that utilized this, but of course after the increase in the foreign exchange rate, and this is now almost close to the market prices, this number, this guarantee, and even over. because some people also receive some incentives for the equipment. So we have more people that applied for this. But still, of course, if you make the modeling in the US dollars, especially the debt service ratio does not change, but it is still a positive development, as Anne stated. If something different happens next year, the investors again may be considering this model. One of the biggest problem, I would say, is just because of over-application of the license, especially some high contribution pays are requested for grid connection, and especially these are all recommended by the investors, and sometimes it can actually go up to 7, and we mentioned $7.3 per cent, and it means an over $3 of a contribution pay worldwide, I would say, when we benchmark it there. So it is actually 3.5 cents of a contribution pay. I mean, other than this, this is not the case. So probably at the same time, it's important to be much more rational as the investors ourselves, I said. And also the foreign exchange risk that I would like to also mention about. Of course, so as to do this, including the financial products, there are several difference, but we have the construction period and operation period foreign exchange risk. First, about the operation risk, especially the risk during the construction is just the decisions related to the operating period. YEKDEM is dollar-based in Turkey, and there is such a perception. You know, looking at the free market prices, the free market prices are identified by the natural gas prices in Turkey, and the natural gas prices are formulated to the oil prices, and the oil prices are over US dollars. Therefore, the free market prices are based on the US dollars, according to the perception in the country. But BOTAŞ actually, maybe just because of populism, I don't know, but BOTAŞ, actually there is, I mean, it is not according to the dollar that they are doing. And the electricity prices up to now in Turkey is not dollar-based. Of course, this may change. And the more liberal the natural gas market is, and since the state also, as a result of privatization, lost some of the advantage, but I mean, probably the completion of the privatization in energy will last for a couple of more years. So if you are selling to the free market and you are adapted over the US dollars, you have an foreign exchange risk. There could be some derivative products that you may use so as to handle it. There are also certain developments on this. There are some good products. And as for the construction period, I would say we are saying we are mostly getting the credits over the US dollars, but still between the debt that you get and the investment that you make, there's a mismatch in the foreign exchange. And investment period is, of course, very short, and with some cheap cost, it is possible to resort to derivative products and eliminate the risk. And after speaking about all these problems,
Kaynaklar arasında bir karşılaştırma yaptım ama hani
I made a comparison, and I'm not just going to enter into this a lot because I've already discussed this. Now, the foreign banks, they have higher capital requirement, and the debt service ratio that they would like to see in the models is higher, and they can go up to longer terms, and they can actually give low cost credit. But despite that, Of course, in terms of documentation and so on, things can be much more complicated. And at the same time, if you do financing with the foreign banks, and I mean, you have less likelihood to close it from one resource only.
Çok kısa enerji örneğine değinmek istiyorum. Aslında bak.
Also, I'd like to provide Enerjisa as a case in here. In terms of its financing structure, especially, they are financing their projects in a way that is not so accustomed to in the market. We have actually operational capacity is 2,814 megawatts, and the wind capacity is 212 megawatts of this, so corresponding to 77.5%. But we're not establishing project companies and as Enerjisa. All projects are under one company, and therefore for financing, I mean, it is actually a hybrid, a project financing and corporate financing. And in particular, our lenders, I would say, even if they do grant the credit for a project, but actually they are doing it for a corporate. Of course, there are advantages of this for the financiers as well, and for us, for Enerjisa as well. The financier, I mean, even if they do provide financing only for the wind, but also we have the HPPs, TPPs, because we also can make use of the cash flow of the other projects as well. So if there is a problem with the wind, my hydro power plants are working, so I can handle that service accordingly. And if not, for example, I have the thermal power plant, I make money out of TPPs, so I can finance my WPPs. So far, we actually have financed 17 projects. As Murat also mentioned, we did it with 29 banks, and through 3 billion euros of finance just for generation. So a structure with 29 banks, of course, it's not easy to handle it, but there are good advantages out of this, I should say, because it helps us to be much more flexible. This is the reason why we pursue with this organizational structure. As for our partners, E.ON, of course, Sabancı itself. I mean, they also provide us support for financing, but it's not only for financing. Also, Sabancı has a huge local experience, and E.ON at the same time has a huge know-how on the energy industry. E.ON, by now, only E.ON's production, the generation capacity is higher than the entire generation capacity in Turkey. And as a striking note, I should say. Also, in terms of in terms of also health at work, health and safety at work, we are also making a lot of use of E.ON's experience. Of course, this also has its reflections on environmental issues as well. So it also increases our management standards as well. So we now have more access. That's all I can say. If you have any questions, I can get the questions. Thank you. Yes, so this is the Q&A session, and we just try to provide you with a different perspective. And yes, please. Hüseyin Koç, I'm from Germany. My question is to you. In all the sessions, wind energy is shown as a cure to fossil fuel and the current deficit. I do agree with this, but from the other perspective, the entire wind energy technology is from abroad, and the financiers are also from abroad, because people import machinery and equipment. Also for the components, there will be further expenses, and at the same time, the credits as well. So it is just like, I mean, we're running from one dependence to the other, if you're asking me. what is important is actually the local share. There's the need for the local manufacturing of the turbines. The company that I am representing is making know-how transfer to the Turkish companies for turbine manufacturing. But the problem that we have is that there's something specific. Even if we, for example, manufacture the turbine, they are saying it will not be bankable. You know, it is mostly a track record. I mean, you need a track record of experience. I mean, especially for a new and a local turbine, you're not giving any chance because you look for a track record of experience. So my question to you is, I mean, if you want to, how is it going to be possible for the new manufacturers to be on the market if you have any such? You are asking this to whom? All the bankers. Let me support you. I think you are also coming from abroad, I guess. Actually, so we are repeating ourselves. I mean, because the know-how transfer will be from abroad, because you're also from abroad, because this requires high technology, and it requires new technology. As we have already discussed, our savings are not adequate, the deposit savings are not adequate, and therefore, because even the credit deposit ratio is 15% lower, and that's the reason why even our banks are looking for other financial sources. It's 60% by Vakıf Bank, and this share at the same time will continue to increase for the other banks as well. And of course, there will be use of local financing. İş Bank, again, they have quite a high ratio. Vakıflar Bank, again. Therefore, in terms of finance, I would say there are several ongoing things. About local turbines, I know there are local turbines manufactured, and we as the ministry, I'm representing the ministry, so it's actually, there is, an additional premium, additional tariff given for local turbines. And this is something that is criticized by the foreign manufacturers because, on the other hand, and because we also have the same disadvantage from the finance side. I mean, this is the argument that we have. Looking at the facilities in Europe, the long-term average, for example, is not the case in Turkey. And therefore, there's an inequality in foreign finance side, so we're balancing it with local manufacturing in here. I mean, if there is something that is distorting competition at one side, the same applies here as well. Of course, the finance industry is focusing on energy a lot, especially there is also the environmental issues as well. We have, in terms of renewable energy and energy efficiency, there are several ongoing studies. And of course, I think they will fix the problem so far, but there's also the technology side of this. I mean, technologically at the same time, I think it is important that, at least with local component manufacturing, at least it should be started, in my opinion. I mean, when we consider harmonization, it must be mutual. And because having all the turbines, I mean, importing all the turbines, as you stated, it is the same. I mean, it is a long-term turbine import rather than the oil import, I would say. So you're right. Cem, actually, in his talk, already mentioned that about the natural gas prices. And he said it's populism, but at least it is for sustainability of the macroeconomic indicators, I should say. I mean, in particular, as the ministry, we are trying to build a balance in this because EUAŞ, TİAŞ, they are all a part of this. So it is important to have an energy price that is sustainable. This is the principle that we have as the ministry. But of course, in the coming years and weeks, there will be actually a new law on natural gas, and there will be a new restructuring. And by this way, there will be the free market conditions applicable in natural gas prices. At least it will be much more effective. In the fuel, just like in the fuel industry, probably there will be 10 or 15% of a price increase as we expect. However, What is important is that natural gas is actually the #1 factor, because the natural gas prices are directly affecting this. And we, in particular, as the ministry, try to suppress some, peak fluctuations. Why? Because the economic growth at the same time should be foreseeable, or at least there's the need for a sound environment climate. This is what we're working on. Of course, in terms of renewable energy, probably in the coming years, with regards to renewable energy, in particular from the perspective of wind, as for the companies to make an investment, it actually shows a safe place. I mean, because whenever there is actually an increase in natural gas prices, it will correspond to the increase in electricity prices. I mean, so especially looking at the repayment ratios, it is 1.25 as is discussed, the repayment ratio. And of course, this can be much more than expected. Therefore, any investment in here, especially for the profitability of the company and also for the profitability of the bank, I'm sure that it could be much more positive. So, that's all I can say as the minister. It's just a frame. I don't know what our colleagues would be saying.
Mic is off, so
Bizlerde de var. Bakanlık da bu kaygılarla Murat Bey'in bahsettiği gibi takım önlemleri almak için çalışıyor. Benim gördüğüm şu yalnız. Bu bir süreç. Burada Türkiye'de de sıfır değil, belli bir başlamış işler var. Yeterli mi derseniz yeterli değil. Biz Türkiye Kalkınma Bankası olarak şu anda 3-5 tane direk üreten, rüzgar direği üreten firma var. Bunlardan bir tanesini İzmir'de.
there are just a few companies that are manufacturing towers, and one of them in Izmir that we have provided funding for. And the other day, I had the chance of meeting with the company representative. It was really pleasing because the 2-year capacity has been contracted out, which is really pleasing for that particular company. I mean, if they've managed to make a contract for the 2-year production, then it'll possibly become more successful. In the turbines, for instance, there are 80,000 components in a turbine, all of which do require high technology. I think that's the stage. I mean, within the process, within the period of time, we'll be going to that direction. Anyone else would like to react? In the meanwhile, I also would like to add something. We've taken the example of Germany. We are still working on the renewable energy strategy paper for Turkey. It's about to be finalized, but there is one thing that I'd like to mention. We've studied this Spanish model, the Italian model, and we've looked into the impact of these sectors into finance, particularly German model, which I think it's really very evolved, and that's the reason why we're giving examples from Germany. About Germany, we've checked about the licensing model, but they're just asking our licensing model from us, and we're in a very intense relationship with the German government, and they're turning back to us, and they're trying to make an adaptation of the system of licensing that we're using here. They think the licensing system in Turkey is sustainable, economically feasible, budget-wise, I have to say it's not impairing the system. Therefore, they think that the renewable model that is being implemented in Turkey, they think, also in terms of the feed-in tariff, think to be proper, more proper. Of course, they cannot get into the local machinery part and everything, but although they would be willing to apply that, of course, that would be potentially harming their exports potential, so they have some disturbances to that point. But in terms of the other aspects, they're following us. One point that I have to highlight here, the local content subsidies that you're giving at the same time is competing with the export subsidies of the other countries. Wouldn't that be right to say? and the favorable credit conditions are given, but they are sometimes beyond the local content that you're presenting. Therefore, it's mostly the imports winning. Therefore, my recommendation is the 5-year local content subsidies that you are giving for 5 years. Maybe if it's increased up to 10 years, it can be a stronger and attraction for the companies. Secondly, I understand that there is a huge competition that is running in the tenders. Also, there is a contribution fee that is payable. Taking all of these into account, it would be less likely for the local turbines to win this competition, because the other brands are global brands. They're manufacturing for the rest of the world. Therefore, they have high supply capacity. They have higher figures. Therefore, when compared to newly evolving local brands, they have a higher likelihood of winning. If you give some advantages maybe to the local turbines, like for instance paying a less contribution by the local companies, I think that would have a major advantage to the local manufacturing industry. Thank you. And do we have any further question from the audience? Yes, please.
İki soru geldi.
Yeah, I'm Oscar Merk and I'm from the Netherlands. I have a small question to the East Bank concerning the tower in the field on the site. My experience is that for bankable reports, it is also possible, a very modern version, it's the LIDAR. Why is that not in Turkey? Could you comment on that? The LIDAR, it's say the laser. You understand the LIDAR or not? In Turkey, there are towers for a 1-year period.
Yeah.
As a bank, you need that. But in Holland, for example, and in Germany, we have.
You mean, are you asking how long are we demanding the measurement of wind?
Why don't you accept, for example, a LIDAR measurement for a bankable report?
Laser. Are you okay? Sorry, actually, this is not just İşbank. I think there is, as far as I know, no bank in the Turkish banking sector accepting alternative kinds of measurements. But of course, if it can be approved by our reputable technical advisors that this system of measurement is dependable regarding the project feasibility, we will of course evaluate it. We are always ready and open to discussion regarding this different kind of measurement system. So we are not categorizingly rejecting it. We are open to discussion, but we should be persuaded by a very reputable technical advisor on this. Because we are not technical people, we are finance people. So I think...
Do you understand? Yes. LIDAR is international accepted, and it's a very flexible system. A tower you put and you cannot change it once it's put. And LIDAR is a machine, and you can be more flexible with it. You can horizontally and vertically measure the wind on the site. So as a bank, if I were a bank, I would say, okay, let's choose the flexible and downgrade the risks on a project. But that's my point of view, with all due respect.
No, thank you for your sharing.
Okay.
We are always open to discussion. If you want, you can always visit us in our premises to evaluate more on this.
I will.
We are ready to listen to you,
Okay,
your
I will.
point of view.
Thank you very much.
Maybe you should present your study to all the banks to make them accept their preparations. Their reports should be based on your measurement methodology. So this could be not only with the İşbank, maybe you should do it with all the banks in Turkey.
Hello. I want to make one comment what I gave yesterday in a similar speech. In Turkey, the wind measurements are done in 10-minute periods, and the grid code is oriented on 1 minute. So this means if the variation of the wind in 1 minute is not measured, because every wind measurement is based on 10-minute data, and the wind turbine, if it's providing electricity, is cut it after 1 minute in the variation of the performance, it's only allowed to put 5% more. This means that the 10-minute data are having not the correct result in the measurements. This means that the calculations are not correct, and this means that the turbines in practice are producing less than it is possible. Yeah? This is the point what we want to mention. We are investigating on the subject, and it could have a huge impact on the, I cannot say financeability because it's not our job to do, but if there is a harmony between measurement, calculation, and reality of feed-in, this is an important topic. Yeah? Just I want to give this comment, and it is something what has to be investigated in the branch between the wind consultants, between the manufacturers, and also the electricity distribution companies, because the Turkish grid is weak, and therefore the rules of the Turkish feed-in are very strict, one of the strictest in the world. Yeah? And as we are only measuring 10 minutes data, and the variation of the wind in the 1 minute is highly above what is allowed to feed into the grid, we have a problem in this field, and this may have an impact also for higher energy generation calculations, but also on the measurements. Thank you very much.
We thank you. Any question? Yes, please.
Merhabalar. İsmim Kadir Ertürk, Ertürk Grup.
My name is Kadir Ertürk from Ertürk Group Incorporation. I've been involved in the sector for quite a long time. We have activities about the wind industry. LiDAR, in Turkish LiDAR, is quite an effective device, but it's not very much known in Turkey, and it's expensive. Therefore, essentially, there is no need for raising complaints because they can use it in Turkey. There is no problem to it because the legislation allows to it, because there is no criterion in the legislation that it's prohibited. The sensitivity is known. Therefore, the LiDAR system can also be used for bankability. There is no problem in terms of bankability if the system is used according to the legislation. With the LiDAR, you can do the wind measurement, and there is no statement within the legislation that prohibits that. That is just a preference of the banks, maybe, yeah? And the banks are following some international rules, so there is no reason why they would reject an internationally valid measurement. The only thing that they need to do is just to look into that. Good day. My name is Talit. I'm the project director for Daldex. Now, Jim spoke about the full project finance, and the reason for not preferring it, if I'm not mistaken, is basically the costs during the installation. Now, for the bank's purposes, what is the reason for not preferring the full project finance? Or how would you comment, Metin and Gülyüz, on that? What's your opinion? Full project finance. What do you think about full project finance, particularly from the perspective of wind power plants, of course? For full project finance, there are some risks that are attached to the construction. Taking those risks under guarantee is extremely important to us. Also, in the continuum of the project, operation should be sound, and although it may look as if there is no risk to that, there might be many risks, including natural disasters, technical problems, or there can be some turbine-associated problems, and it may take longer than it's assumed to take care of this problem. Of course, this might be reflected in the contract as to the maintenance aspects or breakdown aspects, but if and when these take place, the financing that is provided by the banks might be at stake, because what we're speaking here is taking from one side and giving to the other, because the other side will be asking from us if, there are some repayment problems from the perspective of the banks, there might be some reimbursement problems, and therefore, and of course in Turkey, the history of project financing when compared to the globe is shorter, respectively. We know that these models may be extensively used in different parts of the world. I think the sector will be evolving into that, but the banks might need some time until that happens. I agree with that comment, but one thing that we can say, which is different, is at the time of the investment, of course, the investors, we would like to just incur this to the investors. There might be some negative aspects, and there is no bank in Turkey at this level willing to take the investment risks because the EPC standards and the international standards are not very extensive. Most of the investors are just concentrating on piece-by-piece subcontracting. And that's the reason why we are undertaking a significant cost risk. And on the other hand, at the operational period, we are more flexible, especially in renewable projects. There are many non-recourse finance projects. Therefore, if we have confidence in the dynamics of the project, or speaking particularly for the operational period, as from the very moment that there is a minimum level of revenue, there is a non-recourse financing that we are providing, and I think we'll be continuing in that direction, at least for the moment. Can we add the perspective of an international bank here? Because we are working in close touch with the international banks, and indeed they're not willing to make. Some of them are willing to make non-recourse financing of the projects, but it's very interesting, though, that there are those banks who are not asking for EPC contracts. If these are well-known, reputable ENN contractors who are from time to time active, setting up partnerships with local contractors. They know each other and they minimize the risks of the projects. But still, the investors, for the purpose of reducing costs, would prefer not these, but the contractors that might be selecting. That's number one. For the operational period, they say that we take Yekden price. Fair enough. When they do so, then of course the amount of the capital that the investors should be putting in is increasing, and they're not willing to do so. If this happens, I think even the international banks would probably be willing to do non-recourse project financing. There's one thing that is important here for the EPC contracts, that there is the need for a professional institutional structure so that the bank might take it as a guarantee. Secondly, there are the need for the power purchase guarantees or agreements. These kind of concepts are being evolving. And I think that the private companies are now in the period of setting up guarantees among each other. Let's say there is a procurement agreement with a producer by Sabancı. This might be taken as a guarantee by the banks. This is something probably that will become more usable in the coming period, and everything is not, or it should not be down to the government guarantees, but institutional guarantees instead. These two contractual structures do provide a coverage, I think, for the basic risks in project financing, which I think that the international finance sector will be considering, and that's actually how it works in some well-developed countries, be it the measurement companies or the generation companies or the contracting companies. They would probably have these kind of addresses in the sector. Unless we have further questions, I would like to close the session. Thank you very much for your contribution. Do I see a hand over there? Okay, you may take the floor, sir.
My question late. My name is Samir Sambul from TRE. I just want to ask the banks one thing. The feed-in tariff, as it is now, is low compared to the wholesale market. Okay? Because I jumped to the other room, they're saying the wholesale market is higher. And the feed-in tariff is fixed for 5 to 10 years without any consideration for inflation. Okay? Now, is the bank willing to take a risk on a lower feed-in tariff guaranteed by the government, or go for a higher revenue with the wholesale market?
Maybe in the future, you think?
Now they want to take the risk of just the government guarantees of revenue, right?
Yeah. So today's
so they don't want more revenue, they don't want more profit.
So you mean in the future the price of...
No, if I go into the bank now,
yeah,
with that, I'm going to get my income from the wholesale market, not the feed-in tariff guaranteed by the government. Is the bank willing to take that risk?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The bank will not force you to go to the feed-in tariff and ask for YEKTAM prices, but the bank will probably make the debt sizing according to feed-in tariffs and not the wholesale market. That will be your challenge, maybe.
Okay, so the challenge is they keep the lower rate, but they need a stricter guarantee on the higher rate from the wholesale market, right? Or
Yeah.
sort of long-term contract to the private sector.
You will be taking the price risk there.
Yeah.
And your debt sizing will be calculated according to the feed-in tariff.
Okay.
Let me identify. We provide the feed-in tariff and the fixed price to achieve the finance sector some kind of saved because from the risks, so that some investors, some companies has installed their wind turbines within the guaranteed feed-in tariff prices, but some of them don't prefer this. The balance is there. If there is the local content more, the investors are preferring the feed-in tariff mechanism. If the local content is not present in the investment, preferably the investors are using the wholesale market prices. So this is in the preference of the investor, how they found the finance or how they want to be an actor in the energy sector. Especially we will see more activity in the energy exchange when we establish the energy exchange. It's already been established, but it's not operational at the moment. After the energy exchange became operative in the market for the wholesale prices and other prices will be more effective in the trade, I think, other than the feed-in tariff prices. I thank you. Buyurun.
Yeah, my name is Warneroli of Wind4 Consulting. I would like to make 3 short considerations. One is about the LiDAR, that from the international point of view is accepted, but only for macro-siting purposes. So from the bankability point of view, you need to establish the energy long-term production of the wind farm, and the LiDAR is not the proper equipment, also because the international standard, technical international standard, recognize the met mast as the first measurement way. The other thing is about the 10 minutes measurement. The 10 minutes measurement of the wind is only because the 10 minutes time is representative of, statistically representative of the wind. It's not depending on the energy sold to the grid. And the last opinion is about the competition of the local manufacturer in the Turkish energy market. Because also if you can avoid the problem of bankability, performing especially technical due diligence on the manufacturer and the wind turbine model that you want to use for the project, and maybe the bank, if trust in the technical consultant, can accept this kind of technology. The real problem, I think, that are the warranties that the local manufacturer can give to the bank. I mean, performance bond, warranty bond on the contracts, the warranties on the availability that is energy-based on time-based, and the big competitor, international competitor, can offer this kind of solutions in a strongly way, and also can ensure by the human resources, the team, the presence on the sites, the supply of main components and spare parts. These are practical and technical issues that the local manufacturer, in which local manufacturers have big problems to get the same objectives. Thank you.
We thank you. And reply? Yeah.
I don't want to bore the auditorium with a 1 minute, 10 minutes discussion. We will keep this on afterwards. This is a strong mind we have, and it's like that. No, I have a question just with yes or no to be answered. Can you imagine from the bankability side that you will accept a wholesale tariff in the future after establishing these new rules? Because until now, wind farm investors every time have to fall back for the finance on the 7.3 US cents, but they're making a higher wholesale tariff. Okay, the market is not already established, but can you imagine this in the future from some point that you will accept a higher tariff also on the wholesale market for the refinance? Teşekkürler.
Okay, we thank you. Cevap vermek isteyen?
Yapmamızı mümkün kılan bir
Now, for a price mechanism that would just make this that is applicable for the future, of course, if this kind of a mechanism comes up, we can base our calculations on that, like the wholesale market, as you say. But it depends on what will happen in the long run. But this can be run by bilateral agreements. By the way, we have intraday market. As the intraday market comes in, although the intraday will just looks harder, I mean, more difficult for the renewable energies, particularly speaking for the wind energy, intraday market or the intraday pricing mechanisms will be supporting us more, particularly for the renewables, and the intraday prices will, I think, be established, and this will show us the level of advancement that Turkey just will be showing in the future, and it's a very important indicator. And as I said, these bilateral agreements are in place, but we need those bilateral agreements to be more extensive, because in Turkey, the distribution companies being privatized has just been a recent process. The process has been completed early this year. Although this was a practice, I mean, said to be in place, the agreements for consumption have already, I mean, recently been completed. Here, the government or the state, the public, should be just in the position of clearance, observation, and a mechanism maybe of just observing. So when the system becomes fully operational, as you say, the preferences for the prices will be based on our subsidy system only when there is local content. Otherwise, the ordinary commercial pricing systems probably will be used, and preferably the wholesale prices then will be preferred. What is important for us is to see our way forward. I mean, as the bankers, as we see the future more, we're willing to provide credits, of course, to the sector. We are willing to be creditors to the sector. So we are willing to support the sector in the best way possible. As you have seen, and there are some examples in our previous practices, we are giving credit for the energy investments, but on the other hand, in the manufacturing, for instance, industry, those investors do have factories as manufacturers. If there are some bilateral agreements that there will be factories for buying, of course, we can take the project into consideration, basing our assumptions on those bilateral agreements, provided that there is a contract or an agreement submitted to us. Thank you, audience. Thank you, panelists. This has been a very fruitful session. We have, by the way, some representatives outside, some stands that you'll find some details as to how we can proceed in our transactions. By the way, I would like to give the certificates to the panelists.